You know, managing corporate inventory is, honestly, it's a lot like managing the food in your fridge. Think about it.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, yeah.
Right, because, like, if you buy too little, you starve. You open the door to nothing, and, well, that is a stock out.
A very personal stock out.
Exactly. But if you buy too much, it gets pushed to the back, it hides behind the mustard, and it rots, which is basically obsolescence.
Right.
It's this constant daily balancing act that you perform, without even really thinking about it. And when you zoom out to the global supply chain, it's just a massive high-stakes version of that exact same dynamic.
It really is.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring the seemingly mundane but secretly incredibly dramatic world of inventory management. And we're drawing our insights directly from the APIS Certified in Logistics, Transportation, and Distribution, or CLTD, learning system.
Which is a fantastic resource for this.
It is. Our mission today is to look past the cardboard boxes sitting in a warehouse. We want to uncover what inventory really is, why it causes so much intense internal corporate drama, the shocking hidden costs of holding onto it, and the surprisingly cool technology used to track it all.
Yeah, because scaling that household fridge dynamic up to a multinational operation, it doesn't just multiply the volume, it fundamentally changes the nature of the financial risk involved.
Oh, totally.
To truly grasp the stakes of this deep dive, we have to completely redefine what we mean by inventory. Like if you're just picturing finished products waiting on a retail shelf.
Like most people do, yeah.
Right. But if that's all you picture, you're only seeing the visible tip of the iceberg. Inventory exists in these hidden pockets at literally every single point in the supply chain.
Yeah, so let's bring you, the listener, into this. When you hear the word inventory, you probably just think of the finished goods. But the APCS text, it breaks this down into multiple categories that tie up capital long before a product ever even hits a shelf. You have raw materials, obviously. Then you have work in process, or WIP, which are goods in various, incomplete stages on the factory floor.
And then the pipeline inventory is where the sheer scale really becomes apparent.
Wait, pipeline inventory?
Yeah, also known as in-transit inventory. This represents goods physically moving between locations. So if a company relies on ocean freight, they might have 2 months worth of inventory physically sitting on cargo ships in the middle of the Pacific Ocean at any given time.
Oh, wow.
Right. That is a massive amount of corporate wealth just floating on the water, entirely illiquid.
But if it is on a boat, it is still on your balance sheet as an asset. You just, can't sell it yet.
Exactly.
And then the text specifically calls out a category that I think a whole lot of people overlook, which is MRO, maintenance, repair, and operating supplies.
Oh, MRO is critical.
Yeah, because this isn't the product itself.
Yep.
This is the oil needed to keep the warehouse forklifts running, or the drill bits for the manufacturing robots, or even just the cleaning supplies for the facility.
And running out of MRO is catastrophic. If the automated conveyor belt seizes up because you ran out of a $50 synthetic lubricant, the entire multi-million-dollar operation grinds to a halt.
Just over $50.
Exactly. And it happens regardless of how much raw material you actually have waiting to be processed.
Wow.
So managing all these different classifications across multiple global nodes, it brings us to a foundational concept in manufacturing logistics, which is decoupling.
Right, decoupling.
Yeah, decoupling creates this intentional independence between the supplying of a material and the actual use of that material.
The text actually uses a really fascinating example involving float planes to illustrate this.
Oh yeah, the float point example is great.
Right, so imagine a manufacturer building these specialized aircraft. They build the fuselages in one highly specialized process, and they build the pontoons in a totally separate process.
They do not build one complete plane sequentially from start to finish.
Exactly. They manufacture and hold inventories of fuselages and separate inventories of pontoons, and they assemble them later based on actual customer orders.
And the mechanics of why they do that come down to managing bottlenecks and cycle times. Decoupling allows different stages of a manufacturing process to operate at their own maximum efficiency.
Without being dragged down by the slow parts.
Exactly. They aren't constrained by the slowest step in the chain. Like, suppose a fuselage takes 10 hours to fabricate, but a set of pontoons only takes 2 hours.
Okay.
If you force those processes to run synchronously, the pontoon team is just standing around doing absolutely nothing for 8 hours.
So it's waiting.
Right. By decoupling them and placing a buffer of inventory between the processes, you achieve economies of scale for the pontoons without artificially slowing down your entire factory to match the fuselage rate.
It makes me think of a town's water tower.
Oh, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, because you don't need the local water treatment plant to run exactly at the speed you turn on your tap to brush your teeth. I mean, that would be impossible to engineer.
Absolutely impossible.
So the tower acts as a buffer. It holds the inventory of water so the treatment plant can run at a steady, mathematically efficient pace, and you still get water pressure exactly when you need it.
Right. It decouples the supply from the demand.
But this leads me to a major point of friction. Decoupling works beautifully when the buffer holds. But what happens when the water tower runs dry or overflows because the different nodes in the supply chain just stop communicating with each other? Well, when visibility across those decoupled nodes breaks down, the supply chain falls victim to the bullwhip effect.
The famous bullwhip effect.
Yes. This phenomenon was famously quantified back in the 1960s by an MIT systems scientist named Jay Forrester. He used a simulation known as the beer game.
Right, the root beer game. It's notorious in business schools.
It really is. The simulation assigns participants to roles, retailer, distributor, manufacturer, and tasks them with fulfilling orders for beer while minimizing their inventory holding costs and avoiding stockouts.
And it always ends in disaster because a tiny, almost imperceptible change at the consumer level turns into a massive, panic-inducing crisis upstream. I really want to dig into the actual mechanics of this. How exactly does a small fluctuation turn into a tidal wave? Like, how does that snowball?
Well, the distortion is primarily driven by systemic information delays and a complete lack of end-to-end visibility. Let's look at the mechanics of independent forecasting.
Okay.
In a fragmented supply chain, the distributor doesn't see actual consumer purchases. They only see the orders coming from the retailer.
Right. They are blind to the actual customer.
Exactly. So if a retailer sees a tiny, unexpected spike in demand, say just 5 extra units, they don't just order 5 units from the distributor, they order 10.
To rebuild their buffer.
Right. They want to rebuild their buffer and establish a new, higher safety stock level.
Because they don't want to get caught empty-handed if this new trend continues.
Precisely. That is the exact mindset that starts the chain reaction. The distributor receives an order for 10 extra units. They run their own independent forecasting model. They assume demand is trending aggressively upward, and they place an order for 20 units with the manufacturer.
Just to ensure their own warehouse doesn't run dry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by the time that distorted demand signal hits the actual factory, the manufacturer interprets it as a massive surge in global demand, and they overproduce by a staggering amount.
I have to pause here because the absurdity of this is wild. Think about it. If a retailer runs a random 20% off weekend sale just to clear some end-of-month shelf space,
Right.
and they don't explicitly tell the manufacturer about the promotion, the manufacturer might think the product is suddenly a permanent global sensation.
They absolutely might.
They might essentially greenlight building a new factory just to keep up with a localized weekend clearance sale.
I mean, history is literally littered with companies that built new factories based on ghost demand. It happens all the time.
That is insane.
And beyond independent forecasting, another mechanical driver of the bullwhip effect is strict lot sizing policies.
Oh, like minimum order quantities.
Yes. If that same retailer only needs 12 extra units to cover a demand spike, but the manufacturer's strict logistical policy dictates that they only ship in full pallet quantities of, say, 100 units.
The retailer's forced to order 100.
Right. Suddenly, a genuine market demand for 12 units looks like a demand for 100 units to the supplier.
You know, this sounds like an unfixable human nature problem. If I'm the warehouse manager for the distributor, I'm always going to order extra just to cover my own job performance metrics.
Of course you are.
I don't want to be the guy who ran out of stock. You really can't regulate human panic or self-preservation.
You cannot regulate panic, which is why mature supply chains try to remove the human guesswork entirely through systemic integration. The primary solution highlighted in the APCS material is sharing actual point-of-sale data directly upstream.
Okay, so bypassing the middleman's forecast.
Yes. This takes the form of CPFR, which stands for Collaborative Planning, Forecasting, and Replenishment.
Wait, collaborative planning, what does that actually look like on the ground? Are executives from different companies literally sitting in a conference room together every week?
In a sense, yes, but digitally. It means the trading partners are no longer guessing in silos. They actively share promotional calendars, inventory levels, and strategic plans.
So the manufacturer knows about the sale.
Exactly. If the retailer plans that 20% off weekend sale, it is entered into a shared system months in advance so the manufacturer can adjust production schedules accordingly, eliminating the surprise factor entirely.
Wow.
And taking that a step further, companies utilize vendor-managed inventory, or VMI.
Okay, VMI. This brings to mind the classic textbook example of Procter & Gamble managing the diaper inventory directly at Walmart stores.
That's the perfect example. Procter & Gamble doesn't wait for Walmart's purchasing department to run a flawed forecast and place an order. Through VMI, P&G has direct, real-time access to the sales data at the Walmart checkout registers.
So they see every scan as it happens.
Yes. P&G's own algorithms monitor the actual consumer takeaway and manage the replenishment directly. It stops the bullwhip effect in its tracks because the vendor is reacting to true, unadulterated consumer activity, not distorted purchase orders from a middleman.
Okay, so if fixing the bullwhip effect requires massive, deep system collaboration across completely different companies, you would assume that these individual companies at least have their own internal houses in order.
You would assume that, yes.
But the text paints a totally different picture. It details this intense internal turf war over inventory strategy.
Yeah, the internal politics of inventory are brutal. The supply of materials has to satisfy the operational needs of various stakeholders within the business, and the fundamental nature of those needs inherently conflicts.
Right.
Let's examine the sales and marketing departments, for example. Their primary metric is revenue generation and customer satisfaction.
So they want maximum inventory. They want the warehouse literally overflowing so they can guarantee a 100% customer service level. Because if a client calls and wants something, sales wants to be able to put it on a truck that exact second.
Because to a salesperson, a stock out means a lost commission and a damaged client relationship.
Totally.
But then, moving over to the operations department, the people actually managing the factory floor, their perspective is driven by utilization metrics.
Which is different from sales.
Very different. They also advocate for high inventory levels, but for different reasons. They want massive stockpiles of raw materials on hand to ensure their production lines never face a stoppage.
Because an idle machine is wasting money.
Right. Furthermore, operations wants to do long, continuous production runs of a single product to minimize the downtime associated with changing over machines to make something else.
Oh, and long production runs naturally build up massive reserves of finished goods inventory.
Exactly.
But then you walk across the hall to the finance department, and it is a completely different universe.
A completely different world.
Finance looks at a warehouse full of products, and they don't see customer satisfaction or machine efficiency. They see tied up illiquid capital. They want to keep inventory values as aggressively low as physically possible.
Yes. Finance is laser-focused on a crucial profitability metric called the return on assets ratio, or ROA.
ROA.
Right. The formula is essentially your net income divided by your total assets. If you have $50 million sitting in a warehouse as inventory, your total assets, which is the denominator in that equation, is artificially high.
And a massive denominator mathematically crushes your ROA percentage.
Exactly. It makes the company look highly inefficient to investors and shareholders.
Wow. If you are listening to this and you work in one of these departments, you know this friction intimately. It is literally a zero-sum game internally. Sales wants the warehouse overflowing, and finance wants it practically empty.
And you have to add to that the business leaders, the executives, who are looking at the macro strategic picture.
What are they worried about?
They live in fear of the loss of inventory value. They worry about obsolescence, technology becoming outdated or fashion going out of style before it actually sells.
Right.
And they worry about shrinkage, which is just the polite corporate catch-all term for scrap, physical deterioration, and straight-up employee theft.
Shrinkage. Right. So how does anyone win?
Well, a mature supply chain organization understands that letting one single department dominate is a path to failure.
Makes sense.
If sales dictate strategy, the company goes bankrupt from the cost of holding excess stock. But if finance dictates strategy, the company loses market share because they never have anything available to ship.
So they have to compromise.
Right. The APS framework stresses looking at total cost objectives to find a mathematically balanced solution.
And from what I read, the ultimate tiebreaker in this corporate civil war usually comes down to carrying costs.
Yes, carrying costs are the great equalizer.
Because this is the actual literal price tag of letting goods sit idle. And the numbers the text provides are terrifying. Carrying costs can range from 5% to a staggering 50% of the inventory's total value annually.
Yeah, and organizations that lack mature logistics practices routinely underestimate these figures.
Hmm.
Let's break down the mechanics of that annual carrying cost because it's fascinating.
Please do.
The physical storage, the warehouse space, the electricity, the climate control, and the warehouse staff. That actually only makes up about 0 to 4% of the value.
Okay.
Insurance on the goods is typically 0 to 2%. Local property taxes on inventory might add another 0.5% to 2%. And obsolescence, the statistical risk of the product becoming dead stock, adds another 0.5% to 2%.
Okay, let's do some quick math on that high-end 50% figure. If you're listening to this and running a small business, you're probably doing this math in your head right now. And by the way, this applies to the extra boxes sitting in your back room, too.
It absolutely does.
If a company holds a $100 item in a warehouse for a year, it could cost them $50 just to let it sit on a shelf doing absolutely nothing. That completely wipes out the profit margin on most products.
It does.
But looking at the percentages you just listed for storage, insurance, taxes, and obsolescence, they don't add up to anywhere near 50%.
No, they don't.
Where's the massive remainder of that cost coming from?
The largest and honestly most treacherous chunk of carrying cost is the capital cost.
Capital costs.
Yes. The APCS text states this single component can range from 4% all the way up to 40%. Capital cost is the opportunity cost of having your working capital frozen in physical materials rather than utilizing it elsewhere in the business.
Oh, so it's like burying your life savings in coffee cans in the backyard.
That is exactly what it's like.
Sure, you technically still possess the money, but it is entirely stagnant. It isn't earning compound interest in an investment account. You can't use it as a down payment on a house, and you can't use it to pay off a high-interest credit card.
That analogy hits at the very core of corporate finance. If a company spends $10 million on extra raw materials that aren't immediately required for production, they forfeit the ability to use that $10 million to purchase automated, highly efficient factory machinery.
Wow.
They can't invest it in research and development to outpace competitors. They can't use it to pay down corporate debt, which means they continue to bleed money on interest payments.
So it's not a direct bill you pay.
Exactly. It is an invisible drain. You do not get a physical invoice in the mail at the end of the month for lost opportunity, but it absolutely ravages the company's financial performance.
So if holding on to inventory is that financially toxic, why wouldn't finance just mandate empty warehouses across the board?
Oh, right, because if you don't have the product, you can't sell it.
Right, the paradox.
So how do companies survive this paradox? They don't guess anymore. They track. And that brings us to the digital transformation of logistics, specifically technologies categorized under ADC, or Automatic Identification and Data Capture. All right, ADC. This represents the systems that automate the flow of information without relying on human data entry.
Because humans make mistakes.
Constant mistakes.
Yeah.
Human data entry is notoriously slow and plagued by keystroke errors. And when you are dealing with global supply chains where a single miskeyed digit can send a shipping container to the wrong continent,
Oh, man.
automated capture is non-negotiable.
Well, we're all familiar with legacy 1D barcodes, the standard UPC with the vertical black lines you see on literally everything.
Yep.
A traditional 1D UPC code was a massive historical leap forward from manual counting, but as the text points out, it has a severe limitation. It identifies the SKU, the stock keeping unit.
Only the generic class of product.
Right. It tells the scanner this generic item is a 16-ounce jar of brand name peanut butter. But that is where the visibility ends. It does not carry a unique serial number for that specific jar. It does not tell you the batch number or the expiration date.
Which brings us to the absolute necessity of 2D barcodes, such as QR codes and data matrix codes. Because they encode data both horizontally and vertically, they can hold vastly more information in a much smaller physical footprint.
Which is huge.
It is. And the APCS text highlights a pivotal industry initiative driven by GS1 called Sunrise 2027.
Sunrise 2027. This is a global push to upgrade point-of-sale scanners across the entire retail industry so they can process 2D barcodes by the year 2027.
Exactly.
The implications of this are massive for both inventory control and consumer safety. I mean, we're talking about a scenario where you're checking out at the grocery store and the scanner doesn't just register a tomato, but queries a database to know exactly which farm it came from.
Yes.
And the date it was harvested and instantly flags if it is part of an active food safety recall.
That is the exact operational reality Sunrise 2027 aims to achieve. It transitions global inventory tracking from a generic product class level down to an individualized item-specific level.
But it's incredible.
It really is. However, even with highly data-dense 2D barcodes, the underlying technology still requires a human operator to physically point a laser or camera at the label.
Right, you still have to scan it manually.
Yes. So to achieve true frictionless automation, supply chains turn to RFID, or radio frequency identification.
RFID tags. The text actually breaks these down into a few flavors. You have active tags, which have their own internal battery. They broadcast a signal over a long range, but they are expensive. You would use active tags for tracking high-value assets or ocean shipping containers.
Correct.
And then you have passive or semi-passive tags, which are incredibly cheap because they don't have a battery. They draw their power from the radio waves emitted by the reader itself.
And the transformative power of RFID lies in the physics of backscatter. It does not require a direct line of sight.
Oh, so you don't have to point a laser at it.
Exactly. You can drive a forklift carrying a shrink-wrapped pallet of mixed goods through an RFID reader portal at a loading dock, and the system instantly identifies and logs hundreds of individual items inside those boxes in a fraction of a second.
Hundreds of items in a second. That is wild.
And furthermore, unlike a printed barcode, which is static, the data associated with an RFID tag can be dynamically updated as it moves through the supply chain.
Right. The text mentions the EPC Global Network, which utilizes electronic product codes. This means you can dynamically update a tag's location data to establish an unbroken chain of custody.
Chain of custody is everything in some industries.
Exactly. Think about a highly sensitive pharmaceutical drug moving from the manufacturing lab to the regional distributor and finally to the local pharmacy. Having an immutable, automated log of every time that item passed a sensor is incredible for preventing counterfeits and ensuring temperature compliance.
From an ROI perspective, evaluating the return on investment RFID was historically deemed just too expensive to implement at the individual item level compared to printing a fraction of a cent barcode label.
Sure, the tags cost more than the ink.
Right. But the modern retail landscape, specifically the massive rise of omnichannel retail, changed that financial calculation entirely.
Omnichannel retail, yeah. The text specifically calls out major retailers like Macy's and Target. They rely heavily on RFID to enable their buy online, pick up in-store models, known in the industry as BOPIS.
Yes, BOPIS. Omnichannel retail elevated RFID from a luxury to an absolute survival requirement.
How so?
Well, think about it. If a customer purchases a specific blue shirt online and drives to the physical store expecting it to be waiting for them at the service desk, you cannot afford to have a stockout simply because your inventory system showed a false positive.
Oh, because the customer would be furious.
Exactly. You cannot promise that level of instantaneous cross-channel service unless you have real-time, line-of-sight-free tracking of your inventory, both on the active sales floor and in the chaotic back storage room.
Wow. Let's pull all of these threads together. Inventory is so much more than finished goods gathering dust in a building. It is a massive strategic balancing act that literally dictates the survival of global corporations.
It truly is.
It involves decoupling workflows to keep manufacturing physically efficient. It requires deep systemic collaboration and shared data to avoid the devastating, panic-driven ripples of the bullwhip effect.
And it demands strong executive leadership to referee the zero-sum internal wars between sales, operations, and finance. You have to constantly balance the desire for perfect customer service and machine utilization against the hidden, profit-draining reality of carrying costs.
Especially that invisible, crushing opportunity cost of frozen capital we talked about.
Yes, the capital cost is the silent killer.
And finally, it relies entirely on deploying cutting-edge tracking tech, from the impending Sunrise 2027 transition to 2D barcodes to the frictionless standing of RFID networks, just to keep the whole fragile system from collapsing under its own weight.
It really is a marvel of modern engineering, data science, and logistics that the right product ends up in our hands exactly when we want it.
It really is. So I want to leave you with a final thought today. The next time you walk into a big box store and see a massive, overflowing 50% off clearance bin, I want you to look closely at it. Think about the incredible, chaotic journey of those specific items.
Yeah.
Are you looking at the direct physical result of a bullwhip effect gone wrong? Did the sales department win a bitter internal fight against finance 6 months ago, and this markdown is the inevitable fallout? And as we approach Sunrise 2027 and the rise of data-rich tracking, it makes you wonder how much of your own personal inventory in your fridge or garage at home might benefit from a little digital transformation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.